Welcome to Module 1 in Property Investment and Finance. This module really sets the tone for the unit. You'll find that there are two themes that go pretty much through the unit. This first few modules concentrates particularly with mathematical skills. These are really important. For those of you who, limped along through business, finance or other financial studies, you'll find that this is going to start off with a rapid review of some of the key mathematics and investment ideas that you found in introductory finance. But then it starts to use these, especially the mathematics, quite intensively. And in fact, mathematical modelling is going to go right through this unit. And if you're continuing on to do further property studies, you'll find that you'll be applying this kind of mathematics even more intensively in units such as advanced valuation. And so it's worth spending the time. To make it easier for you, especially since you're learning online, we've developed some very specialised resources to make it easy to teach yourself. With the mathematical modelling, one thing that you will discover, hopefully as you go through the exercises fairly early, is that the mathematics, the equations if you like that we're using, aren't terribly complicated or involved. They appear that way, and in some cases we're going to make some extraordinarily complex Excel spreadsheets. But each part of those spreadsheets tends to come down to relatively simple, or at least standard, mathematical functions. And so it's lots of little easy bits, put them together, and you end up with something which is very powerful. Working out, and at least getting on top of, what those easy bits are like is really worth the effort. To make that a bit easier, we have gone over the introductory financial mathematics, and there's an exercise on that. And there's also exercise which focuses primarily on those Excel exercises, those Excel skills that are particularly useful for this type of work. We're assuming that you've got a basic understanding of how to write equations into Excel. There's an exercise that we've been developing progressively over now quite some time in response to student experience and so on. It's called the Fin tutorial, or FinTut, and that consists of a Excel spreadsheet based exercise that goes through those skills which are particularly relevant to be on top of as you use Excel, to be able to apply it to the kind of modelling that you're using in financial analysis and also in property analysis. So it's really worth spending the time getting on top of those. To make things a little bit easier, if you haven't encountered them before, the modelling spreadsheets that we use are self-correcting. What this means is that as you go through the exercise in the spreadsheet tells you, if you like, whether you're right or wrong. Usually that consists of a yellow highlight in a cell which needs something in it from you, being populated by the right thing from you, and the yellow highlight in that cell will disappear. So, yellow highlight disappearing means you've worked out what's required. Those yellow highlights will disappear if you put the right number in, but you'll find most of the cells that you'll be populating are actually looking for equations. And so you can cheat by putting the number in if you've worked it out, on a calculator or something. That might be nice for getting the yellow highlight to disappear, but it's even better if you write the correct equation, because as you'll see as you go through the exercises, if you put the equation in correctly, what it means is that equation's drawing data from other parts of your spreadsheet. And so if you want to use other data, Once you have the right equation in, of course, the equation is going to process any data at all correctly. The exercises that we're doing generally relate to practical work that investment analysts and property valuers need to be on top of. What this means is that as we work through this unit and the units which follow on from it, the models that you do in this exercise will then be very useful for doing real live professional work off into your career. And maybe you might want to tweak them up as you go along, but certainly it means that you've got yourself armed with very powerful little models, in fact a whole suite of them. In fact, just recently I had a phone call from a former student living in central Queensland who had been using some of the models that she had developed in this unit to look at her own investment properties. She had 3 of them. And she decided that even though on paper, with the back of an envelope type of analysis, it looked like she was getting a good return, when she did the analysis with more rigour, more depth, using the models that we produced here, this is her own data, but using the models that she got from this unit, she was able to discover a completely different investment prospect. And last time I spoke to her, she was keen to lift her or remove at least one of those properties from her portfolio. So this stuff is very, very useful, and it's similar with the other ones, whether it be for development or investment or what have you. Okay, I've spoken a fair bit about the numbers side, and that might appear scary for you. But one of the things that I hope you discover, especially using these self-correcting exercises, is that if you apply the time, and really the trick here is to apply time, look at this like an adventure, a treasure hunt. Get rid of those yellow highlights. As you go through that, I guarantee that people that do it zealously, regardless of what your mathematical background is, at some point as you're going through these, you will have an aha moment. That little moment where things go from being impossibly difficult to suddenly you think, aha, now I get it. This is actually as easy as Small was saying. And from then on, you'll just power on. It's a lovely experience. I can still remember when I started doing this stuff, now more than a few years ago, having exactly the same experience. And it is really quite delightful and worth spending the time to get to. So I hope you enjoy the adventure of working through the modelling. Now, all of this stuff is all done on Excel, but I don't want you to limit your capacity, your skills, merely to being able to produce fancy Excel spreadsheets. You can't always do that in practice. There are lots of situations where you'll need to be able to pick up a calculator and fairly quickly knock out some numbers or knock out some calculations from numbers that you might just have on, data that you picked up over the phone, or maybe a report that you're analysing, or whatever it is. And you don't have enough time to pull out your spreadsheet. Maybe you're doing consulting work where none of your models actually suit the particular task. You need to be able to put it together yourself, or you need to put it together in a hurry. What that means is that running parallel to being able to do fancy things with Excel, you really need to be able to work things through on a calculator. With this unit, because it's advanced finance and it's really being focused on people who intend careers that at least in some ways expect advanced skills and capacity in these areas, financial analysis, property analysis and so on, I recommend very strongly that you invest as early as you can in buying yourself a financial calculator. The bad news is that there are lots of different makes and models of financial calculators, and just about every one is different. They all have different operating systems. To get the same result from even 2 calculators made by the same manufacturer, sometimes you have to press an entirely different set of buttons. For that reason, this is not a TAFE course on how to run a calculator. It's a university course for people who are a little bit smarter. And while I'll occasionally do demonstrations using a Hewlett-Packard 12C financial calculator, which tends to be the enduring most popular calculator in the financial world. It's a nice little pocket calculator, and it's been made for years and years and years, but just happens to work extraordinarily well. And they last forever. I can guarantee that because mine is now coming up for over 30 years old. Not something that I necessarily want to admit to, but you'll be able to go down the shop and buy yourself a new one. Anyway, they are the flagship for financial calculators. They work really nicely. They're not too expensive, although a little bit more pricey than maybe some of the competition. Where was I? We're not going to be going through what buttons to press because I've bought a Sharp or I've bought a Casio or I've bought a this, that or the other, whatever. Buy yourself a financial calculator. Choose wisely. Remember, this is something which is probably going to last you if you purchase wisely, something which is going to be with you for most of your professional career. And then go through the instruction book, and I would recommend look up YouTube for your particular calculator. If you want to buy a Sharp financial calculator, fantastic. Just go to YouTube, Google Casio Model XYZ, whatever it is, and you'll usually find lots and lots of demonstrations by people doing my sort of a job, showing you how to use these things. That's your job. I expect you to be able to use a calculator in parallel with the modelling, the spreadsheet work, because that's a really vital skill. It makes you look very employable, and that's one of the things that we're really looking for. So definitely go for a financial calculator and spend time making sure that you can use it well, and that's something that's a little bit of a spare time project for you, if you like. I recommend that you do that earlier rather than later. I have in the past had people coming close to exam time contacting me and say, "Oh, I haven't got a financial calculator. We're going to need one in the exam." Well, bad news is you really do need one in the exam, that is. And if you try learning how to operate it 48 hours before the exam starts, may as well forget it. Okay, start early. And to practice. Now, I mentioned earlier the importance of practicing by spending time with those spreadsheets, the self-correcting ones, getting rid of the yellow highlights, all that sort of stuff. Whenever you do that, calculate the same equations as you finish a model. Go through and check what's happening in the different parts of your model by calculating next to it with your financial calculator and a piece of paper maybe. You'll find that's really good. Okay, am I going to give you separate exercises for your financial calculators? Well, I'm not. And the reason for that is that you're going to have lots and lots of worked examples that come through what we do in the Excel modeling world. And each one of those is potentially an exercise for your financial calculator. And so that's what I recommend that you do. Go to YouTube or your instruction book to learn the basics of how to operate the thing. And then as you do the modeling, every time you do a self-correcting exercise in this unit, before you put it away, by all means get rid of the yellow highlights and so on, but before you put it away, get out your piece of paper and your financial calculator and calculate it again. That has a real advantage because it gives you confidence. Once you've got rid of the yellow highlights, you know that your model is correct, and so it means that you can just aim to get the same answer with your calculator. It's a really gold-plated way of coming up to speed with that calculator skill. Okay, that's the number stuff. Hopefully, if you do what I've just been explaining to you, by the time you get to the end of this unit, if you hated maths all the way through school, all of a sudden you'll be saying, "Hey, this is not so hard, and I'm really good at this, and I'll be able to impress the boss when I get a job, or if I've got a job right now." And they'll be fantastic, and I'll be a very happy bloke. That's hopefully the transformation that we're looking for here. Okay. As well as that, there's a lot of theory in finance. Yeah, you've already encountered a certain amount of theory in your introductory finance unit. That introductory studies, is really meant to introduce you to a very broad range of ideas and topics in history and so on in the finance world. It can't cover everything. It certainly can't cover in depth property investment calculations and so on, and property investment theory. So it's going to be a fair bit of theory. We're going to move into that theory in the, more or less, I won't say the second half, because it's probably the second 2/3 of the unit. There's only a few units of numbers, and then we move into more theory topics and so on. The theory, hopefully you'll find it interesting and useful. Hopefully it'll put more depth into your background understanding of finance, and it will give you the capacity to better engage with the financial world as it evolves around you. Not just next 12 weeks while you're studying property investment and finance, but also to enable you to make sense of the finance news and the advice that you might get from different people and so on going off into the future. Because really this is meant to give you the equipment to be able to understand the world theoretically as well as practically, for at least a big part of your professional career, and stimulate you actually taking that further as you go along. It's a fascinating area because really the finance world is extraordinarily important, but finance theory, and certainly the opinions of many people that work in finance, sometimes can be highly speculative. And speculative I'm using as a euphemism for questionable. There are a lot of things that people say who pride themselves as being economists or financial consultants and so on, which is actually a lot of baloney. It's up to you to do the background reading and study to discover what's fact and what's fantasy in this particular world. And so taking the theory part of this unit seriously should help you along with that. And hopefully we give you a nice variety of topics to be able to cut your teeth in. At the end of this, you really should have considerable capacity for both analysing real estate investments from a financial performance point of view, but also to be able to understand where property investment is going into the future. If you really understand finance, one of the things that you will know is that finance has to do with getting the present value of the future returns, the future cash flow stream, if you like. And so that means that finance is a lot to do with forecasting and understanding the future. Understanding the future in the finance world means understanding the economy, and the economy is there to serve the society. And so you have to understand the society, and these days we live in a global community or a global society and so on. So you need to have the antenna up to be able to make sense of all of that. So there's an awful lot of stuff that you have the opportunity for getting on top of as you apply the finance lens to your studies and to your career. I hope you enjoy the unit. I think it's a very useful one, both personally and also professionally. I hope by the time you get through 12 weeks of it, you agree with me. All the best.